Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens with your host, Jake and Scott. In this week's episode, we're going to be recapping 2024. What happened, what didn't happen, what might happen in 2025. That'll probably be the next episode, but sit back and buckle in as we unpack what happened in 2024. Scott, how's it going, man?
Yeah, it's going. I feel like we're snowed in for a few days, so it's a good time to record a podcast and do a little recapping.
For sure. And no better time to get together and have a couple of the first episodes of 2025 be just the two of us. You know, we don't do it as often as I think we should. I think people really enjoy when we do these episodes. But, you know, sometimes we just like to tell stories, and we get to do a lot of that.
Yeah, and just banter for a while. That's good.
So, you know, it's been a minute. Jeff the Creed just launched, and we got to go out to the farm, and that was kind of the last time we saw each other in 24. I survived the stomach bug. No one in my family besides me drank alcohol when that started to hit. So that's what I like to say is the inside alcohol helped me survive the stomach bug right before Christmas, and then, you know, powered through what was fake reality for a couple weeks, and now we're here. How about you?
I still feel like we're in a fake reality because of all this snow, and it's like the Christmas and New Year's hangover.
Oh my gosh.
It's just never ending.
No.
Kids are still at home. You know, school is not back in session because of snow, and the knock on wood, the sickness, you know, that always goes around at this time is always the tough one.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. But, you know, it wasn't a small gap between, you know, the last time we talked and now. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff that has happened and kind of got us thinking about what should we talk about for, you know, this year and looking back from last year. In 2024, especially December was a very, very busy month with a lot of stuff that happened. And I think let's start with probably the biggest news of 2024. And I think that's the ratification of American single malt. It's the first time since the 60s, right, that the TTB has done something like that.
Yeah, it's been 50 plus years.
Yeah, so
it's been quite a while. So it's a big time, which is exciting.
It is, and you know, I thought it was really interesting. It like hit on a Friday night, like it was like late in the evening. The coverage was kind of wonky. You know, everybody was you know, posting stuff. And it was funny because all the American Single Malt Commission people got on social media and they all had them holding picket signs, kind of walking down a street, and they all posted the same things on social media. I thought it was really interesting and really well done. And, you know, there was people from Boulder, Lost Lantern, Cedar Ridge, Santa Fe, which, you know, the Colkegan, which is now Santa Fe whiskey, right? Like that's a big rebrand, new name there. So a lot of cool stuff happened. And I think that has to be the biggest stamp of 2024.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good way to cap off 2024 and then lead into 2025. Cause I think like the TTB is officially announcing it like in a few days or like in a week or so.
Yeah. There's a big party or something.
Kind of weird. It's like, hey, we're going to announce it and then we're going to publish it and then we're going to talk about it. So it's like, what's that date? You know, it's like, what's the date going to be, like the bottled and bond day or bourbon ratification day? Like we'll see what people attach to, but I think it's a big one. We've been watching this one come for a while, hoping, you know, it seems like most people are excited about it. There's probably a few distilleries that aren't super excited about some of the requirements, but we'll see if they like have some grandfathering or anything like that. So
yeah, I'd definitely be interested to see if there's grandfathering in on the single malt, you know, kind of side of things. I think that's one of the things we'll unpack in 2025 as we kind of look a little bit ahead. All the rules kind of fleshed out. I mean, we had talked to pretty much just about everyone, I feel like, but now that it's in stone, like how do they feel like they got the rules? Because if you look at it, I mean, it's very Scotch-esque. Like the only difference being the ability to use new American oak, right? You know, they put the caramel coloring in there, they put some other things. And so that's what I found to be the most interesting. If you read the rules and then you put it right next to Scotch, I mean, it's almost like identical.
Yeah. I mean, high level, I think that there were some people that were like, oh, well, it should only be limited to pot stills. Well, you got to think there's not a lot of pot stills in America because there's a lot of bourbon stills, which are columns. And so that was one thing I found kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Another was the distillation proof, 160, the cap of distillation proof, 160. There is at least one distillery that does not meet that, Brothers Justice, and they distill up to like 180, which to me seems more like Scotch grain alcohol, like where they can distill it higher for blended Scotch. So I'm kind of interested in their perception of that. Maybe we can get them on the podcast and kind of hear what their position is. Another one was that it's malt, which is not surprising. Like it's malted barley, but there are some people that said it should have been malted anything, which I don't really think that jives with the true intent of what malted barley, whiskey based is. But there's still enough variety there that you can have a malt bill that makes up whatever percentages of the barley is certain types of barley and brewers barley, things like that. So I think it'll be interesting to see how people continue to play in that game.
Well, I think it'll be super creative too. It's like, I think about someone who's done like 100% malted rye. Let's call it Old Potrero, right? They've done something. Could they have been laying down 100% malted barley in their free time because it's a pot still? Then you go to, what you said about like a malt bill, you go to what New Riff has done and Kentucky malt whiskey, right? Like it's not our Kentucky single malt, right? Like as Jay Arisman would say, it doesn't have to be American. Why can't it be like, this is Kentucky style of single malt whiskey. And they have, 7 or 8 different types of malt into their, malt bill, as you mentioned. So I think it's very interesting. Only time will tell. When people look at, we talk about the movement, right? Like it's still less than 1% of all alcohol sales in America, right?
Yeah, it's pretty small. But I think it's a niche that is currently getting older. Like you're seeing 5, 6, 7, 8, 10-year-old American single malt, which is exciting too, because people like to see the higher age statements on malt.
Yeah, because it's more of a delicate thing, especially like now you see that price creep that was up for malt start to come back down to the standard. So, you're not paying for a 3-year-old Westland, you're not paying $70 anymore. That's come back to, proportion. And, especially as
$50, 45,
yeah,
I think is kind of where they're at now.
Yeah. And the other thing is like, the large conglomerates have got in on that game. Right. Whether it's, for better or worse, you have, speaking of Westland, like, they were purchased. You have Balcones, they were purchased. You have, obviously Jack Daniels put out a single malt that went outside of the United States primarily. You had, Jim Beam enter the thing with Claremont Steep, right? So you have a lot of moving parts. Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see how that is adopted from a major distillery perspective as well.
Yeah, Bullet American Single Malt, that was one that I never saw coming.
You didn't have that on your bingo card for 2024, but that did come out, and we did go to a really nice dinner out in Shelbyville. Yeah,
so just in terms of the big guys playing in that market, to build awareness around a new spirit category, I think is going to be great for the smaller guys that are still doing it.
Yeah. And for anyone who thinks that, this is my opinion only, I think me and you agree on this though. For anyone who thinks that Jack Daniel's doing that or Bullet doing that is a bad thing for craft distilleries, like you've lost your mind, because now people know that like the main players are paying attention to it. And like you look at like the case volume sales that have come out, and like even American bourbon is dwarfed by Scotch, like absolutely dwarfed. And you're talking about 17 million cases of Jim Beam or of Jack Daniels and 12 million of Jim Beam, like huge volumes. And they were like 4th and 5th on the list. Like that just shows you people understand that single malt word and terminology, and they're hungry for that around the world. And so it could be palatable worldwide a little bit more than bourbon, which is higher proof, stronger astringencies, more sharper edges sometimes, that people may be more interested in, hey, this American single malt has got something 4 to 5, 6 years. Now can I compare that to a Macallan? Maybe or maybe not. But it'll be really interesting to see as American single malt producers age, will they start to sherry their barrels? Will they start to double oak them or whatever to like really appeal to the rest of the world?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be definitely interesting to see how it evolves and how it matures as a category, not just in the barrel. I mean, obviously it's maturing and people are putting out older and older stocks, which is great, but just, it's in its infancy still, even after 10 or 12 years of the fight to get it recognized by the TTB. So
100%. Really interesting. That'll probably come up in our 2025 conversation as well. What was the most memorable moment for you in 2024? Whether it's, going someplace, doing something, what was the thing that stood out to you most that Scott got to do whiskey related in 2024?
Oh, damn. Holy shit.
Yeah. Making you think a little bit on the podcast. That's right.
So I think my top for 2024 had to have been the Kentucky Bourbon Festival in September.
Yeah.
I think we've gone in years past. This is one of the best ones yet. We had a great group that was there with us that like helped make the trip even more enjoyable. And we didn't even really do Bourbon Lens stuff. We didn't
do Bourbon Lens stuff.
We were just consumers at that point. Like we were just along for the ride. Yes, we had access. Yes, we covered the event, but it didn't seem like work, right? It was just fun. So
yeah,
I think KBF 2024 was definitely a highlight for me, just because of it's like every year it gets better.
Well, and I think we've gotten smarter, right, with it. Staying in Bardstown is the way to go. Safer, more convenient, but like having people that are a part of our community, our Bourbon Lens community with our Patreon, like Dan and Dave and Sean, and then getting to meet new people like Aaron at Last Cut Crystal. Like if you haven't checked out his work, go over to his Etsy shop and buy a glass. It's gorgeous. Like, yes, you'll pay a little bit more money, but like it's absolutely phenomenal. But like having those people, building new relationships, it made me feel what whiskey was about. Right. Again, it gave it a fresh breath. It had sometimes become monotonous. New press release, drink the whiskey, talk about it, put it up on the website. Like it was kind of like that point that I was like, I needed a reset, and it just kind of gave me a spark to the end of the year, to be honest. So I agree with you wholeheartedly there. But I will also say it was pretty damn cool to be like the guest of Greg Norman's Bar and Grill, Australian Bar and Grill in Myrtle Beach. It was a really cool opportunity. Had an engaged group. The food was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Shout out to Penelope for helping us get some bottles there. Matt, aka Bourbon Jeeper, for really kind of, facilitating some stuff. We had Bob join us. Go check out Cocktails with Friends if you're looking for a cocktail focused podcast. But yeah, I mean, I thought that was a really cool event just to get away and do something different where we're hosting and using our knowledge, and loosely say knowledge. But I think people really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. And it was a lot of fun, and got to go to one of my favorite places in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So no regrets on that one. I thought that was a lot of fun.
It was a great short trip, but it was packed with, it was just a lot of fun. Like we hosted a bourbon tasting. Like,
yeah,
I didn't think we'd be hosting bourbon tastings. Now I'm working on a relationship. Hopefully we'll be doing some bourbon tastings in 25, teaser, but building a relationship for that. But that was, all credit to you for help setting that up. That was just, they reached out. It was like an opportunity, and you're like, let's take it.
Yeah. Let's figure it out. And we just kind of shot for the moon, and we landed on it. And it was a lot of fun. I think some other things that were really a good time were, you didn't get to go to this one, but true story, launching that at Kentucky Castle, passed that a gazillion times. I thought that was really cool. Got to do goat yoga. So, you know, that was a cool experience, but man, it's just about like, I don't know for you, but for me, like when I get around the people, the community, the people we talk to on a regular basis, it just gives me so much more energy than like, oh man, we're stuck behind a screen again doing another interview. And like, I love that. Like that sounds so bad, but like, it's so good to be face to face with people, and interact with that in a positive way. And I got all that energy from going out to Jep the Creed, you know, and how much that whiskey has evolved. Like we didn't talk about this on the podcast with them, but from like where it was when it launched to where it is now, I would tell everyone to give it a try again, because I wouldn't have if I didn't go out and do that.
Yeah. I mean, miles ahead. I mean, but that's again, just the maturation of a brand and the maturation of the whiskey, really. So, you know, I'm looking back now that my memory is jiving again, and a year is a long time, even though we say like the year flew by, which it did. But like thinking back to like Derby season, right? So like, you were not able to go, but to go and see the Woodford Paddock Club, the new Paddock Club at the Derby, you know, at the Churchill Downs, like Derby week, that was incredible. Then we had the Rabbit Hole event that Friday night of Oaks.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We got to take the wives out to experience some of the fun that we get to see, you know, that they don't always get to enjoy.
Yeah. How about interviewing suit star Gabriel Macht?
That was cool. Yeah.
Like things you just like when you think about this stuff, like you don't even come to think about it at all. And then it just kind of happens. Or tasting 50-year-old Scotch whiskey with Ben Romek. Like I'm just going back through like as we talk, and I'm like, man, this is really cool. Like, or the relationships we've built with like Sazerac to get us an awesome conversation with Ross and Tribe, aged 12 years. And Dirks Bentley, like this is all in the last several months.
I mean, very recent.
Yeah. Off the Myrtle Beach trip, we got the Cooks Mills podcast in partnership. From 300 on, we've just hit bangers. Like in all honesty, it's like 300 was, we drank with Melissa. We drank birthday bourbon, and it just kind of piled on from there. And then, you know, building your 5-bottle bar, that challenge that we did, man, it's just a lot of cool stuff that we got to do. The last quarter of the year was absolutely phenomenal. And like, I hope people hear that in my voice. I think I had more fun doing the stuff that we did with, I don't know, I'm going back. I'm at 293 right now. I'm going back to a little bit after this. Man, starting with Tamdu and moving on 291, like all the way through, you know, where we are 312 now. I had a blast with that kind of stuff. And that was really, really cool. And what a year. Like it really, and from a podcast perspective, you know, podcasting's weird. Numbers were weird, but man, I had a lot of fun doing it.
Well, it's like we totally didn't mention like our trip to Wild Turkey.
Yep.
Like that was a huge one. The dinner at Wild Turkey, tasting straight from the barrel.
Yep.
With Bruce. Like how cool is that? That's an opportunity that most people don't get. The trip that you planned to Bardstown with Bob.
Bob and them. Yeah.
I mean, the things, you know, the experiences we got, Bardstown Bourbon. I mean, the House of Bardstown, like that event was incredible.
Didn't get to go to that one, unfortunately. But so just think in a year's time, we went from episode 259. We launched on January 1st with 15 stars, who has just shot to the moon. Like Rick and Ricky are doing amazing things. High West, you know, they're due for another podcast episode because they're just due for another podcast episode because I'm a fangirl. And like, it just went on. Like one of my favorite things, and one of the things I've not gotten to try in 2024 that I want to try in 25 is the quintessential from the Beverly. Like,
I owe you a lot of samples. You owe me a lot of samples. We got to like just put a bunch of bottles on a table and just start pouring.
Yeah. But like, you know, it's like Andrew was all the way back in January like of 2024. And so it's like, what conversations are we going to have in 25? Like, that's where my mind is.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly a whirlwind. I'm literally going through my camera roll and I'm like, holy shit. Interviewing Kyle Busch.
Yeah.
Going to a NASCAR race as a guest of Rebel Bourbon.
Yeah, man. Or seeing Whiskey House come online, or finding new brands like Oak Lore. Ben Holiday, like we were in on Ben Holiday before, like it like blew up everywhere. Yeah, I mean, just a lot of cool shit. Like, that's the only way to say it. Like, I will never take this hobby, which this is, for granted one day in my life. Like, we have gotten to do some of the most off the wall, crazy things and fun things just because I think we're authentic. I mean, people can say I'm not, or we are, or we aren't, but I feel like we're authentic and we just tell our story the way we do it. And I'm super pumped for what 2025 will bring.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of fun things that in the works, you know, that we don't even see yet. Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of how last year played out. It's like, things just develop. And I thought that was very cool.
You know, I will say, just a little plug, if anybody wants to sponsor the Bourbon Lens, you know, we're always open to that too. But anywho, we'll move on past that. That was just a little shameless plug. All right. What was the one thing that, so we talked about what we enjoyed. We talked the big thing about American single malt. You had something beforehand. It's really around tourism, I feel like, and bourbonism, as our former mayor would say. You know, what does that mean to you here in Louisville in particular? We'll bring it back here home real quick.
Yeah.
What was one thing that stood out to you about what's happening in the city of Louisville?
Yeah. I mean, recently my wife and I went on a little staycation for our anniversary in December, and we were tourists in our own town.
Mm-hmm.
I think people don't get to do that enough, but just to see how much bourbon has infiltrated into Louisville has been insane. Like, we've always known that Louisville's big in bourbon, but really it's out in the country that's the big bourbon tourism centers. But all the like visitor centers and like off-site tasting rooms that have popped up in the past year and a half. I mean, they kind of started trickling in like mid to late 2023, but in 24 and in the future in 25, like the plans for downtown Louisville and like around the, you know, downtown Nulu area, like with bourbon tourism. I mean, it's insane. Like if you are a bourbon nerd, you don't even have to leave Louisville and you could see so many cool experiences, different places, different bars, different, you know, barrel tasting experiences, things like that. So, I mean, it's just a laundry list. I mean, we could go through them. I mean, press releases every other week, it seems.
Yeah. Well, and so you have amazing brands that are in Bardstown, and you may not have the 45 minutes or an hour to get down to Bardstown. And kind of a shame that Jim Beam was as far ahead as they were when they were on 4th Street, right? But like the Evan Williams experience has been there forever. And now you have the Michter's Bar at Fort Nelson. You have Bardstown Bourbon Company. Pursuit Spirits is coming in soon. You'll have Green River will come through. Monks Road's Boiler House. You can go eat, right? Don't forget about the distilleries. Peerless, Rabbit Hole, Angel's Envy, Whiskey Thief right now has something, you know, so there's just so much to do. Buzzard's Roost, I can't forget about them and what they're doing. And so how that's going to continue to grow and change. You stayed at the Omni, the Castle and Key experience there.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, I had not been to that location. I know you went whenever it opened, and that was like mid 23, so a little over a year ago, but still open, still going strong. I mean, it's just cool to walk into a hotel and there's like a little distillery tasting room.
Yep.
you know, and it feels like you're at Castle and Key, because I love Castle and Key. Their whole whatever you call it, vibe or whatever it's just cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I was gonna like try to talk like a middle schooler, but I can't do it. They speak a whole new language.
I wouldn't go down that road.
Good luck for the Gin Alpha bourbon taster commentator. Very interesting. But anywho, I agree with that. I think bourbonism's where it's at. I think it's going to be the culinary explosion between the two. I think is huge in Louisville. You know, whether it's Chef Edward Lee and what he's done, or North of Bourbon, or what Neat has done. I think that whole thing is also awesome. And the other thing you hit on, other than tourism, is the broadening of bourbon worldwide via media partnerships, and in media partnerships being whether it is a big person attached to a brand like Beyonce and Sir Davis, or it's Kyle Busch and, you know, Lux Row, or pick a thing. I feel like you can literally probably find a thing and attach it to whiskey in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I mean, like specifically like sports and whiskey. Like sports used to be like, get a beer and watch some sports. But now it's like Formula One, NASCAR, NBA, like the partnerships between like the Houston Rockets, San Antonio Spurs, and Garrison Brothers. Like, obviously that makes sense. Like big Texas distillery and big Texas markets for NBA teams. But like even something like Evan Williams partnering with like Learfield Sports. Like it's what was the number one pour of Game Day, or Game Day's number one pour, like Evan Williams. Like, so it's like there's so many connections, like Law's Whiskey House in Colorado, like the Colorado football team. I mean, that obviously they've gotten a lot of good press. So like Law's attaching to them has been nothing but brilliant.
I mean, NIL money has shaped the way bourbon, you know, attaches to sports teams in a very big way. But I mean, if I go back and look at the data, like the raw data on our website, the most hit post that we had was the Crown Royal post. Like the Game Day Crown Royal thing as they drove across the country.
Oh yeah. Like the big rig truck.
Yeah. The big rig truck. Like, so it's wild. And then you have like Jameson is now the official whiskey sponsor of MLS. So it's not just American
totally
whiskey.
Forgot about that one. Yeah. I didn't even put that in my list.
Like, you have all these things, and then you have big name brands, Eric Church and Whiskey Gypsy, Dirks Bentley, Row 94. We talked about
Cole Hauser, Lazy K Bar Bourbon.
We mentioned Gabriel Mocked and Suits, but and obviously that's Bear Fight, but also Seth MacFarlane's attached to that brand as well. And the list goes on and on. You know, Alan Jackson's Silver Belly, I think is what it's called. You know, you have a ton of people putting their foot in this whiskey game, but like the people I really appreciate are the ones who are like, no, it's not just a whiskey game. Like our money, we're in it. Let's roll.
Invested.
Yeah.
Invested in not only money, but invested in terms of time and attention.
Yeah.
Like we've talked about that numerous times, but it's the brands that are backed by the people that are involved. You know, don't just slap your name on the side of a label and be like, it's my bourbon, I'm done. So, I mean, yeah, I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that kind of evolved in 24, and I'm sure it's going to only grow because we all know like the whiskey market is not just the enthusiast anymore.
No, it's the casual drinker.
Yeah, it's an untapped market. It's like, what's the next market? Is it sports? Is it the female audience, which obviously has been growing in whiskey for the longest time? But it's like, what's the next step? Is it Beyonce bringing out a whiskey? Like that's an awesome thing for.
Didn't have that on my bingo card for 25, by the way, or 24, by the way. But the other thing I would say about all of that is what helps people get into bourbon? Well, there's a whole lot of bourbon that's come online that's a lot cheaper to buy now. And so your investment 23 or 22, when bourbon was at this like all-time peak, and people say, oh, the bourbon boom's over. No, just mass production has hit shelves. And so now you can go buy a barrel of whiskey instead of $1,000, you can get it for $700. Well, when you're buying thousands of barrels, that is a big effing difference. And so I think the access to whiskey, as David Mandel would say, from whiskey and access to the customer on the back end, you have producers like Whiskey House that came online in 24 and 25. You'll have Eastern Light. You'll have Potter Jane. So you talk about this, there's going to be a ton of whiskey coming online in the next 4 to 5 years that will allow more access to superstars or whatever to get their brand to market and really be involved and invested in it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how 25, 26, 27 plays out. We all know that people talk about the whiskey glut and like it's the cycle of it. I mean, it takes time for whiskey to mature, and in that time there's a lot of things that change.
Yep.
So it's just how it adapts. Is it brand partnerships and celebrity partnerships and trying to find new audiences, trying to find new markets for what the product is, even like something like RTDs, like
yep,
cocktails, like pre-made cocktails. Like obviously some of this whiskey has to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
We know that the cocktail culture is just continuing to grow. So it's like, is that going to be like another avenue for whiskey? Like we're sitting here drinking whiskey neat. Like maybe that's not the way that people are going to drink it in 3 to 5 years.
Well, they're going to miss out. But that's just my point. That's my opinion. But what I can say is 2024 was a fun year. I won't call it a banner year. Like there was a lot of cool things that happened. It was a great year for whiskey. It was also a sad year for whiskey. We would be remiss if we didn't, take a moment to, say farewell to some brands that we've had on the podcast or we've tried whiskey from, like Sourland Mountain or District Made. It's sad to see some brands go. That's inevitable. That's capitalism. I hate to be that guy. There's some cool stuff coming out of both of those places, I think. But I think there may be more of that in 24 or 25. But that's the part of the business that I don't like is some of the friends we've made or the conversations we've had, now end up in a negative experience.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully the correction doesn't go out and create too broad of a brush and eliminate some really great brands, because there are a lot of them and they're all struggling to find that shelf space and find the consumer and how they can get on the consumer's bar. Direct to consumer shipping is a great avenue.
Yeah.
So it's like, my one bit of advice would be like, find the brands that you identify with, the people that you like.
Yep.
And buy their bottles.
Support the hell out of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big thing you can do is support the hell out of small brands, craft brands, whatever you want to call them, because they need your help. And there's a lot of good whiskey in the marketplace for that to be enjoyed. However, not to end on a somber note, we are going to be looking forward to 2025 in our next episode. So make sure you tune in to that, because we're really excited and we are so thankful that you have spent the many years listening to us, that we could recap 24 and do some really cool things. But the next episode is going to be about 2025. We're going to take a look forward to what we hope happens and what maybe die in 25. And a hint, that's Umbriana. The hint is Umbriana. We hope it dies in 2025. But, we'll see. We can only just speak it into existence. So catch us next time on the next episode of Bourbon Lens. Until next time, cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. Make sure you're connected with Scott and I via social media on Instagram, X, and Facebook. We'd love to connect. And if you're more the professional type, follow us over on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about Bourbon Lens, make sure you're subscribed to our weekly newsletter, The Weekly Pour. For exclusive content and more, check out Patreon. Follow us there at Bourbon Lens. And last but not least, on your favorite podcast listening app, make sure you're subscribed because every Monday, Scott and I release a podcast, and we would love to have you here listening to the newest features and the newest whiskey news. And until next time, cheers.